Hello guys and gals, welcome back to another episode of Haunted Gaming. This time we do a much requested and lengthy creepypasta called Pokemon Obsidian Black. This creepypasta begins with the player telling us how much of a Pokemon fan they are and how they reminisce about Pokemon Red, the first Pokemon game they played in the late 90s, and upon hearing news of Pokemon Black and White they were excited to get their hands on the game. According to the player, the series just got better and better as each game was released. The player tells us how their parents were opposed to video games and how if they wanted to get the game they would have to do so with their own money, which according to the player was tough due to the lack of jobs. So the player had to hold off getting the game for a while. The player searched the internet for several months, finding a good deal for Pokemon, and eventually located a copy called Pokemon O Black for $5 US. It was odd considering at the time the game still went for $30 to $40 in retail stores. The cover for the game was of a shiny Reshiram. The player, however, was eager to play this game, so he or she bought the cartridge, game shipped to the player, and he or she began to play the game. The player did notice something odd about that cartridge. The bolt that held the cartridge's internals were stripped off from the cartridge, but besides that it looked as if the game wasn't hacked or anything, so the player decided to just write it off. Loading up the game, a Japanese phrase appeared, which the player couldn't recognize. Again, the player shrugged this off as he or she just wanted to play this game. The main menu, instead of reading Pokemon Black, just read Pokemon Obsidian Black. The game already possessed a save file with the name Obsidian, and naturally the player checked the save file to see any Pokemon the player could take along. Upon loading that save file, however, it appeared as if the game wasn't played. There was literally no progress. The player then decided to go to the main menu and delete the save file, and upon hitting the combo to delete the save file, the game stated, "Save data cannot be deleted. You are not authorized to delete data." The player found this odd, but then continued to play the save file on the game. The game loaded up and a cutscene played. The cutscene showcased the protagonist's home in a 3D view with occasional lightning that illuminated the area. The lightning flashed a scarred image of what looked like a Pokemon. The lightning flashed again and a figure was seen in a long black trench coat. Lightning flashed again, this time showing a boy sleeping in a bed, and the player realized this boy may be Obsidian. The player found this odd since the game wasn't showing the cutscene the first time, and when the player loaded the save file. Lightning flashed again another time, and this time the figure was in a trench coat. The figure in the trench coat was at the child's bedside. Another lightning flash later, and the camera centered on a gloved hand extending from the right hand of the trench coat figure. The hand clenched into a fist, and it was realistic looking too. Rain fell on it. It was very realistic. And then a voice was heard, which sounded like it belonged from a young, irritated man, and this voice stated, "Friend, this is only the beginning. I sense great things around you. I also sense darkness, growing darkness. When you wake, I will not be here, but keep in mind, I am here, and I have always been here, and I will continue to be here." The screen went dark and a text box appeared stating, "Do you remember me?" A yes or no option appeared. The player selected no, and then another text box appeared, this time appearing to be angry, stating, "Liar! How can you not remember me?" And then the words started to spell out, "Even if it has been a number of years." Another text box appeared from a character named Obsidian stating, "Who are you?" Another text box appeared from a character named question mark. This time replying to Obsidian stating, "You really don't remember me? We were friends once, me and you, best of friends. We had so much fun together, even if we did get in trouble sometimes, and you would always blame me. But they didn't believe you." Obsidian replied with, "They didn't believe me?" The mystery figure said, "No, they didn't. They couldn't see me." Obsidian then said, "Wait, I remember now." The game then flashed to a top-down view of the game. The screen brightness was higher than usual. The player moved and the in-game character got out of bed. As the character walked down the stairs, a text box appeared that stated, "That dream, what could it have meant? Who was the one talking to me? His voice sounded so familiar, but I can't remember." The player was allowed to move again, and the game appeared to continue normally. So the player left New Vema Town. There was mud everywhere. The player went out to New Vema Town. There was mud everywhere. It was foggy, and the music was the Etrelink music, and every route in the game played the Elix Forest music. It was raining heavily on Route 1. Couple that with the Elix Forest music, and it made for a pretty creepy atmosphere. The player reached Accumula Town, and the music changed to Celestial Tower. In fact, the music was all different, even in Pokemon Centers and Juniper's Lab. The game played the SS Ann theme from the original Pokemon Red and Blue. Team Plasma hadn't appeared at all, but the NPCs in the game spoke of a war between two rival armies, the Terminator Militia and the Maxian regime. They spoke that Kanto, Johto, Sinnoh, and Unova were allied with the Terminators, and that they were the good guys. The NPC stated that the Terminators were a militia that was established in 1997 to protect the USA, but secretly the US president in 2010 started a secret army that razed towns and killed people and put the blame on the Terminators, and proceeded to declare war on the Terminators due to them being religious. As the player tried to leave Accumula Town, an exclamation point appeared above the character's head, and an unusual figure appeared on the route between Accumula and Stratian. The figure wore black clothes and had facial features of a Snivy. As soon as this character appeared, the original encounter theme from the actual game, the character spoke and said, "I sense a great energy radiating off of you. You're a trainer, aren't you? I figured as much. I'm a trainer too. What's your name?" A text box full of eclipses appeared, the player assuming that it was just him or her talking to the character. The character replied by stating, "Obsidian, huh? My name is Terius. Now, don't give me that look. I know you aren't used to a talking Servine, but there are reasons behind that, and my clothes, listen, I must go, but I doubt that this is the last time we will see each other." The character then left towards Nuvema Town, and as soon as the character disappeared, the encounter theme stopped playing, and the game played normally. However, some of the music was different. For example, every route was the Elix Forest music, and the gym themes changed to En's Castle theme from the original game, and the gym leader battle music, I assume, was the original Pokemon's Elite Four theme. The player kept seeing Terius from time to time, as if he had replaced N from the original game, appearing in similar locations. Alder was replaced with a person named Alex, who appeared to look like a Team Rocket grunt from the original games. Terius kept speaking like a close friend to the player's character. Some of the dialogue from Terius included, "Such a cheerful place. No one here understands what war is like. You're just like them, thinking that there is always peace. The land I am from is torn apart by war. Every day the opposition grows stronger as we grow weaker." Every time the player encountered Alex, he or she would get some cryptic message about Alex's homeland, as well as some warnings. When Alex gave the player HM Surf, similar to how Alder gives the player HM Surf in the normal black and white game, Alex stated that Unova will fall, just like all the other regions, so be prepared for when shit hits the fan. The player judged by Alex's dialogue that he was possibly just insane or delusional, and as the player walked through the world, he or she noticed that at random times, the in-game character stops and an exclamation mark would appear above the head, and shadows would move along the overworld, and after a moment these shadows would just vanish and the player could continue normally. Again, more background music for various locations were switched around, except this time at slower and lower pitches. The player skipped Relic Castle due to the lack of Team Plasma, and the player headed north to Opelucid City, to Victory Road. There was a large group of police officers. The player was unable to move, and a police officer told the player's character that this was a crime scene and to just stay away. Then, Terius approached next to the player and asked what was happening. The officer told him that it would probably be poachers. There were dead Pokemon everywhere. We're talking Spearows, Patrats, a Pansage, Panpour, and Pansear covered in blood. The music also slowed to a lower pitch version of Lavender Town. Terius walked up to an ace trainer who was dead in a, surprisingly, pool of blood. He then appeared worried and asked the player's character to go to Relic's Castle, and this didn't look like the work of poachers. The player headed to the Relic's Castle and on the way encountered Alex, standing still, asking the player's character why he or she was here. The player's character responded by stating that his worst fears were realized, and they should leave. The screen whited out and the player's character was just outside Relic Castle. The player flew to Opelucid City and was shocked when no one was there. The city was shrouded in a thick fog, and the Lavender Town theme played. The player walked into the buildings and talked to the people, and as they kept talking about the Pokemon tragedy, and now someone was actually killed too, the city folk were all incredibly scared. The player left onto Route 10 and the fog grew thicker, and the music was Fire Red Leaf Green's Lavender Town in reverse. The player saw police officers lying in blood, and on the street, written in blood, were the words, "The Maxia have arrived." Then both Terius and Alex appeared. Alex yelled and said that they need to get out of here, but Terius was calmer and said that the player's character should head to the Pokemon League and search for who is responsible for these gruesome murders, and if the player ever sees men in black clothing, resembling shadows, to run and never stop. The player frighteningly continued, and as the player trekked through Victory Road, he or she saw black shadows. The shadows began moving faster and faster, and the music kept getting more and more distorted, and as the player almost left, an error message appeared stating it's collapsed. Eventually, the player reached the top and met Charon, asking if the player's character was man enough to face the Elite Four. A shadow appeared, and Charon asked who it was. The shadow creeped up to Charon, and with a whoosh sound effect, Charon split in half and was lying in a pool of, blood. The player ran out of the cave, once gaining control, and onto the peak of Victory Road, and upon stepping out of the player encountered Terius again, giving condolences about Charon and asking if the player was ready to take on the legendary Grand Masters. The player's character responded with a barrage of ellipses, and Terius said good luck and wished the player and told him or her to stock up or he or she will surely be fucked. The player entered the Pokemon League, going to the Elite Four room. The player was surprised to see that it looked different from the main game. It was a cave instead, and as the player progressed, he or she met the first trainer to fight, called Dragon Tamer Spyro. The player was amused due to the reference and proceeded to fight the trainer. The trainer looked angry and very battle-scarred. The team consisted of Garchomp, Charizard, Gyarados, Rayquaza, and Hydreigon. When down to the final Pokemon, he would come onto the screen and wonder what was going on, and when he was defeated, simply stated that what he said was the truth. The player moved to the next room and faced someone called Evolution Master Piermont. He looked like a teenage boy wearing a black jacket, boots, and studded belt, and sunglasses with angry green emerald eyes glaring through the sunglasses. His team consisted of Vaporeon, Flareon, Espeon, Umbreon, Jolteon, Leafeon, and what a fucking surprise, Yon. And upon the defeat, simply told the player's character that there's much harder shit left to deal with. Then the player fought Cynthia, wearing gold-runed, red-trimmed Obsidian black armor. She looked tired and scarred, and had a Haunter, Alakazam, Crobat, Umbreon, Seviper, and Arbok. Upon defeat, she congratulated the player, and the player headed forth to the fourth trainer he or she had to fight. This trainer was called Ace Master Terius, and the battle theme was End's theme. The character looked like a Servine wearing a full trench coat. He looked scarred and an insignia on the small pin of his body, resembling the U.S. Army insignia of a captain. His party consisted of Emboar, Excadrill, Simisage, Unfezant, Zoroark, and Samurott, and upon defeat told the player to go and face the final challenge that awaited him or her, the best trainer in the world. The player stepped through the portal and was astounded to see Alex awaiting the player. Alex said he heard a lot of good things from Terius about the player's character, and to be prepared to face the final challenge. Alex had black hair and looked very scarred and burned and wore dark armor. The team was Mewtwo, Raikou, Dialga, Reshiram, Regigigas, and Arceus. Yes, Alex is a legendary whore. Upon defeating Alex, he simply stated, In the overworld, he said he never fell to another trainer, and the player was truly the best trainer capable of being called the greatest trainer of the world. The game then registered the player's character onto the Hall of Fame, and the credits played. After these credits, the player selected Continue, and was moved to Nuveba Town, but something was off. There wasn't any music playing, only wind noises. The room was covered in fog. All the other houses were empty, and there were no Pokemon in the wild grass. There was a message written in blood that said last one alive, and next to it there were bloody footsteps, leading to Accumula Town. Terius then walked up to the player. Obsidian, he said. What happened here? The Lavender Town theme played in the background. Terius had led the player somewhere safe. Terius then asked the player's character if he remembered him. The screen faded and the sound stopped. Lightning flashed and the player's character Obsidian was in bed asleep, and after another lightning flash, Terius stood by his bedside. The player's character Obsidian awoke, and Terius asked Obsidian if he remembered him. The screen blacked out in a sepia-colored world, basically what appeared to be a playable flashback. It showcased Obsidian as a kid, talking to his mother in the kitchen, asking if he could go out and play. The player headed out of the home and headed to Accumula Town, and upon reaching the town, the sky darkened, and 3 shadowy figures grabbed Obsidian, yelling for help. Terius appeared to rescue Obsidian and told him that he was his best friend. Obsidian then wished that everyone could see him, and Terius slowly faded away. Then on another scene, it showcased a broken vase, and Obsidian's mom was angry and yelled at him. Obsidian then blamed it on Terius, and Obsidian's mom stated he wasn't real. Then the game flashed to Obsidian's bedroom, and Terius asked again if he remembered him, and then faded away. Shadows charged the room and surrounded Obsidian. Terius tried to fight and killed some shadows, but eventually was overwhelmed, and his sprite began flickering. Terius said, "You will not hurt him." Terius then collapsed to the ground and the screen turned black, and a text box appeared stating, "None of this is real. You are an innocent little boy. You are one of them. One of the Terminators, knocked unconscious during a battle and mortally injured. The commander brought you here so you can recoup, but now, one of the great commander's lieutenants will fall to the Maxia regime." The screen went black and the game froze, and upon restarting the save file, it was corrupted and the player couldn't start a new game. The player tried to find the person who he or she purchased the game from, and found that the account didn't even exist. And after months of searching, the player found nobody, and couldn't get the game working. Sad but relieved, he or she tossed the game into their closet, and haven't seen it since. Whew, wow, that was a pretty lengthy creepypasta. I think it clocks in longer than Zorax. Man, what do I have to say about it? It's actually quite decent. Now, I'll list what I didn't like about this creepypasta. It felt pretty convoluted at times, especially during the beginning, and I wondered what the hell went on, and that leads me to one of the gripes I have about this creepypasta, is the connection or referencing with the fanfic series titled The Terminator's Army of Legend. So the ending of this creepypasta and some of the warring between the two militias I really couldn't get too absorbed into, mostly because I didn't read the reference materials, and I honestly think if I read them it would have helped a lot. And that's really my main gripe with this. I felt as if the references were a little more easier to absorb, then it would have been better than it already is. But even then, I still don't find the inclusion or crossover from the fanfic to really be that meaningful or necessary in my opinion, but it's okay, I guess, you know? As far as the mentioning of blood goes, it's not too bad compared to some of the other creepypastas we've read. That being said, let's talk about the good. The story, despite being somewhat convoluted, still deeply interested me. I loved the relationship between the player's character Obsidian and Terius, and honestly didn't expect that ending, with him simply being Obsidian's imaginary friend, a simple cognitive entity floating around Obsidian's mind, guiding him in his travels, paving the way, mentoring him as Obsidian grew stronger and more willing to face the horrors that would come before him, eventually leaving him, in the end, to himself, once he finally completed the ultimate goal. As far as other things, like the abnormal music, for instance, I really liked, since they gave some meaning to the events and what was happening in the location during the time. Even though I really didn't find it to be too much, it was a very nice touch. Reading through this creepypasta, it also reminded me of the Pokemon War Theory and Ash Coma Theory, due to the references of a wartime state and the scene of a sleeping Obsidian. I still kind of think the entire events of this creepypasta may all have been Obsidian's dream in a sense, but I'll talk about this and I'll talk about those creepypastas, in another time, but that's really what I kind of think is going on. On how creepy this creepypasta was, it was alright, but it wasn't too creepy. It was a great story, don't mind you, but it wasn't creepy in the sense that Ben Majora's Mask was, or Polybius was, and even Zorax. It was creepy, just not as creepy as some other creepypastas, but still really good. As far as the ending went, I wonder what will happen next to Obsidian. Even though I really couldn't understand the reference to the linked fanfic, I wonder what's next for him. Trained by his imaginary friend and mentor, what's next for our creepypasta hero? All in all, this is a pretty good creepypasta, and I highly recommend you all to go check it out. Links in the description below. This is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, like, comment, and subscribe. I'm out.